Hey guys, and welcome to this first part of my tutorial on doing subsurface scattering on monster flesh. So let's take a look at what we have in front of me. So this is a 3D print, one of my Denizens of Catan series that I released on my Blighter Gods web store, which you can go follow the link on this video, and you should be able to pick this guy up for free during the month of February when this video releases. And if you want to follow along with this, you can, if you've got access to a 3D printer, you can download him and print him out, and then you can do what I'm about to do on this one. Otherwise, grab a miniature of any monster or creature that you have, and you can try this technique out that I'm about to go through with. So this first part will focus on the subsurface layers, and then the second part video will show the painted layers over the top. So yeah, hopefully this helps you try a new technique. It's going to be a lot of glazing, ink washes, a lot of feathering and blending very, very thin layers of paint to establish color. So think like a wet blend, but very, very thin paint. And it's done, as we can see, over a zenithal undercoat, but it's been done with a cream or bone color, and then so a top-down spray of that. Then you mix white with that and do like a slightly brighter version from the very top of the model down, so you end up with this kind of cream color, tan color. And the reason why we're doing that is because these glazes are going to inform what's under the skin. That's what subsurface scattering is. It's the effect of light passing through your body, or like if you put your hand over a light and you'll see the light pass through it, the reflection that comes through that, all of those colors, the bright red and so on, that's your blood, muscle tissue, bone and so on. It reflects all these colors back. You can see it naturally in your hand as well, or like on your body. You'll see reds, blues, all those colors. And this technique allows you to build more realism into your flesh in a very, very quick and easy way. So that's what I'm hoping to show you today. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so to begin with, we're looking at the ink washes and glazes we're going to use. Now, I don't actually know where this is going to end up. You're going to be experiencing this with me. I've done this technique many times before, but I'm not quite sure what I want to do with his flesh yet. But the same technique works no matter what type of skin you end up wanting to do. Generally, this works well on paler skin tones, so it will be something that's a paler color. But yeah, this can work on many different skin tones, but the process is the same no matter what you're doing. So this process is developed from the way special effects makeup artists do prosthetics for movies. So when they make a foam latex appliance, that's often ends up a tan color, and then they add their layers of colors to that, so yellow base, and yeah, and they just build it up slowly over layers. I've worked in the movie industry and I've seen it firsthand, and it's really cool, and you get like a really realistic result. So I thought, well, hey, I may as well use that technique on a miniature. And I've seen plenty of other ways of doing this with more thicker applications of paint, but no one I've seen really doing this particular way, except on some, collectible, collectibles videos like Sideshow Collectibles. You'll often see these kinds of glazing techniques used on their collectible models if you watch the painting videos. So I'm sort of showing a way of doing this that's relatively easy. You don't need to use oils or anything. It's all acrylic paint. So yeah, let's get into what we're going to be using. So the main colors is going to be like purples and magentas, not straight red, but you want something that's a bit more like a magenta color. So we've got this one here, the crimson shade there, or something similar that's a magenta style color. Basically it has a little bit of, I guess, blue in the red, and then we have this violet here, and you could use a purple, you could use anything like that, just some sort of purple shade for that one. And then I've got this what's this nightshade here. This is kind of like a dark blue, Yeah, any sort of blue color will work, and that's going to give you a lot of variation there as well for shadows and so on. Now I don't have an ink wash, but I do have some Bella Brown here, and we're going to put a little bit of really ultra watered down yellows in there as well to simulate where the bone comes to the surface through the skin. So yeah, they're the main ink washes, and what we're going to end up with is, I guess, what old miniature painters or in the movie industry or other industries would call a clown pass or a rainbow pass, or there's a lot of different names for it. But the model's going to look, don't worry, it's going to look very, very multicolored, technicolor looking thing. And then what will happen is once that layer is done in this first part, when we go to do the skin layers over the top, that will all blend and homogenize together into a really nice finish. But in the early stages it'll look a little bit funny, and don't worry, that's all part of the technique. So yeah, hopefully that should all work well. So let's get on to the fun bit, which is adding the glazes. Okay, I'll catch you in a second. Okay, so we're back. So the first stage is adding, what I like to do is start with the reds. So this is going to simulate, you know, where all the blood's coming to the surface. So we want to look at like fleshier areas, you know, maybe a bit around the mouth. You know, on this particular model we've got like pectorals there, so we might put a little bit in the undersides, maybe where the pectorals meet this sort of bony kind of elements, we might throw a little bit in there. Under the neck, in this sort of flabbier flesh, we might throw a little bit of reds in there, possibly around the ear, even though this is quite a bony character, which means probably it'll have more yellows initially. We're going to throw in some red first, and then we might go back and change that. Because this is done so thin, you can easily add, you know, variety colors over the top, and it won't really affect much. So also around the eyes and so on, maybe in those little folds in the forehead, anywhere that kind of feels good, basically. There's no right or wrong here. You're just looking for places where you want to see that sort of redness coming through, and if you don't know where that is, go to a mirror and look at your own reflection, and you'll see tons of areas on your face that have more red coming through, and that's exactly the same spots that you want to do on your miniature, especially like an academic bust like this, which these incidentally are a great way to practice. So yeah, if you have a 3D printer, go to my website and download a couple of these. I always have something free. They're a good way to practice doing these kinds of painting techniques, you know, in a nice risk-free way, because you're just focusing mainly on the face, and it will build your skills and build your ability to layer colors and you know, find the joy and fun in that, rather than treating it as a chore or that kind of thing. So to begin with, I've laid out my my crimson, which is the magenta, the violet, the blue, and the yellow on the palette. And we're using a relatively large brush, something around you know, a 1 or a 2 or something like that, and we're going to begin. So for this technique, you need very watered down glazes. Even though the ink washes are already quite diluted, we want to have quite a lot of water. It should be almost transparent, like quite thin. So probably about 3 drops or so will do it. And we can adjust this as well and build up the intensity of the color as we go. But just for the first pass, we want to do it quite thin. And we're going to be doing things like feathering out to the edges and so on to sort of shade it a little bit, so it's not so stark a contrasts, and making sure that the as the ink dries, it doesn't create too many big pools of color around the edges of the watery mark. You know, you get that sort of watermark thing that you get on a lot of miniatures when you're putting ink washes on. We want to make sure we're feathering that out, and the way you do that is by quickly cleaning your brush, a slightly damp or wet brush, and then just very carefully feathering with the brush back and forth to basically erase or blend out that drying watermark. And we'll be doing a little bit of that with these colors, a little bit like how you do with wet blending, just with very thin paint. Almost the same process. So we'll start at the bottom here. We've got these like pectorals, so I'll just start, let me get that in focus for you. There we go. And yep, we're in focus, and we're just going to wash that in And we can see how that color is reacting on the surface. We're going to bring it all up in here, and at the moment it's a little thin, so we might add a touch more pigment to that blend. Roll it off the end of your brush, and then we just continue adding some of this, especially in under there around where the beginnings of the armpit would be, you know, anything like that. We're just going to start blending that in and just making sure that we pay attention to form. So if there are creases or, you know, in between muscle sections, you want to add that red in, you know, that's going to look really cool. And I think this guy will have a bit of red in his skin color as well. So adding these magentas and purples are going to be really great for establishing more colors. But that's basically what we're going to do. I'll continue to do this around the model, and I'll come back once we've got something together. Okay, so we're back, and I've started on the magentas down the bottom there, as you can see, and now we'll just continue on and I'll show you some sort of other areas where you might want to put it, and then I'll finish off this stage for you. So around the face, you know, we might put a little bit into the eyes, like so. Okay, we might throw a bit in the other eye. There we go. And then just to show you that fading technique, or the way to blend it out. So let's say we've got a bunch in here. Now you've got to be relatively fast. So let's say we splodge a bit up onto here like that, and we're like, ooh, don't know what to do. So what we do is we just clean our brush, wipe it off on a bit of tissue, so it's just a damp brush. And now with your brush there, making sure that that's in focus, we just feather that out and basically push it back into the shadow and build it up around, and that will very, very, you know, subtly just blend in as kind of like a shadow. And so we just do that, and see now we've actually now got this very, very soft red shadow going on there that's blending up over the surface of that form. And so anywhere that you're going to get too much heavy pooling that you don't like, you can just do that. And even while this stuff here is drying, if I didn't like so much of that red there, I can just do the same process, clean the brush, wipe off a little bit of the water, and then come in here and very carefully rub the surface, and it will reactivate that thin wash, that pigment, and just move it around. So if I want to clear, you know, off the top of that pectoral, make that more yellow again, I can just do that and move that out of the way, and just make it a little more yellow. Okay, so that's pretty much what I'm going to do. Just go around and do that. And as I said, anywhere on large big forms where we want to maybe have a shadow forming, like I just said, you place it in like this, okay, and then clean your brush off, wipe it on a bit of towel, and then as it's drying, we're just going to very subtly feather that up. So it's very similar to wet blending. We're just using very thin paints, and so that's what you end up with, a nice subtle shade, and that's all going to be really great for later on when we put the skin layers on. So I think it's a really good technique, very easy to do, very user friendly, and you should have fun with it. So I'm going to finish off all the red areas, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how to add then the purples and the blues, and further intensify this over the whole model. Okay, so I'll see you shortly. Okay, so we're back, and I've done all the reds, and as you can see, I've done more layers to it to intensify some areas, like around the edge of the bust. That's a really nice little trick, just to push the boundary of the sculpt. On a miniature, obviously a full sculpt from head to foot, you wouldn't need to do something like that, but on a bust, that's like a nice little way, because obviously the back is probably going to be painted black, so it helps like transition it over to the black behind. So if you're doing a bust, that's a really nice little trick to deepen around, like the shadows around the edge before it goes to black. Just basically frames the focal point, which it's going to push your eye towards the face, because that's going to have higher contrast, and these sort of other areas just going to fade away, you know, around the bottom of the bust or whatever. So yeah, so that's where we're at. You can see how I faded. If I get that in focus, you'll see the fade happening on the top of the head, and that's been improved, and across this ridge line here and so on. But you don't have to be too careful about it. You can be a little bit sloppy with this. It's not that important. A lot of the skin layers after this are going to take away a lot of that anyway, and we're going to go back on top of the skin layer with a few little glazes after to re-establish some of those colors. Anyhow, this is basically a sketch to help get you started in a nice user-friendly way. So now let's get on to the next color, which I'm going to choose the blue, and the reason why I'm going to choose blue is because the blue will react with the red and you'll get a purple tone anyway, so we may not need much of the violet color ultimately, although we might want to intensify that purple. So that's like a choice, I guess, an aesthetic choice that you'll make depending on what kind of skin tone you want to put over the top, and how deep you want those kind of, almost like a bruise on like if you knock your elbow or whatever and you get a bruise, you'll see these types of colors. It's very bruisey sort of colors. So depending on how much of that you want in the undertones of your skin, but with a monster, that's kind of the deal. You want them to be really funky and weird, so that's often the choice you're going to make. But yeah, so we'll start with the blue. So again, I'm adding all the water into the mix to get it nice and diluted. This blue is actually quite strong, so we don't want to like overpower the model, and most of the areas I'm going to put this in is going to be in shadowed areas, so around the eyes, inside that ear hole there, and down the ridge line of that cheekbone, underneath all of the undersides will get this kind of blue or purple tone. Not so much across the top of the head. That's going to be saved more for yellows, but I may do a small amount of it just to help push the shapes in that skull, because it is quite subtle, so just to help give it more definition. And then across his body there, this kind of organic sort of sculpted textures there, sort of bone-like things. I might put it in between the creases there, and so on. So we'll just get into that quickly, and then once I've started, I'll come back and show you the finish. But basically, again, I'm going to intensify the shading across the bottom half just to help push that sort of depth that this model goes beyond just the bust, you know what I mean? And those kind of shadows help to push that idea. But I'm just going to run some of this blue anywhere that looks cool and kind of feels pretty nice. So I'll just show you in the eye there before I stop, if I can keep this thing in focus. There we go, it's good. And yeah, just get a little bit of that blue up and under there, because that'll look cool. If you put too much in like I have there, just fade it out with the brush, wipe off the excess, and away we go. And that'll just help shadow that up even more and build that I suppose depth of form across the skull, which is what we want. And so I'm going to go back now and do all this to the figure. Not a lot of this color, but a bit. You can see there now the blue is drying. It's going a bit purple, and that's what we want. So in those areas where the colors meet, which is going to be really nice to see in the final skin. So yeah, I'll be back shortly once I've done all that, and I'll probably do the purple as well, and show you that, and we'll just come back and do the final yellowing areas for bone and that sort of thing. All right, I'll see you soon. Okay, and here we are. So all the colors are now added except for the yellows, and you can see it gets this Technicolor kind of look. The color is a little bit washed out here due to my lighting setup, but when you do it at home, you'll see that the colors all blend together, the blues and the magentas and the purple. I did add a little bit of purple here and there just to help deepen it, but you got to be careful with purple because it's a very strong pigment, and it'll push it too far to everything being purple. So I only put that in very select little spots just to help push the shadows or whatever. But I put a lot of that blue into a lot of the shadows, that bruisey tone going on. Really cool kind of effect. And this is your underpainting, your sketch, your subsurface scattering for your skin layers. So I think it comes up pretty cool, and you can definitely have fun with this. And as you try it, you'll realize just how easy it is just to muck around with these colors and get something really nice. And you'll see that zenithal cream is now was almost, you could almost leave this here. Like some of these that I've done almost look cool just as they are, with a little bit of touch up with some bleach bone, or a cream bone color. You could leave them like this because a lot of them look really cool. But you want to push it further. So let's now do a little bit of that yellow just on some of these bony areas, and then I'll show you the finished product, and that will probably complete part 1. And then hopefully when this goes up, part 2 is already there too, and you can follow along with the next part, which is the skin layers. So let's get started with the yellow. So I've got it on the palette. So with this, as I said before, this isn't a wash, so you're going to need extra amounts of water to dilute that down, and this kind of yellow brown color is very strong, so we don't want it to be too strong with the pigment. We only want a little bit. And so let's start maybe on some of these ridges across his shoulder. So we'll just do a little bit. Is that in focus? Yep, awesome. So we'll just start washing in a little bit of that yellow across the top there. And for this, we'll probably do a bit of that feathering. So wash out the brush, clean off most of the water, and then very carefully just feather out some of that yellow, just so it's not too strong. But I think that'll be nice across these bony ridges, just to increase some of that yellowness in the bone. So I'll go through and do a bit of this, and I'll come back when it's done, and yeah, we'll see what it looks like. All right, I'll see you soon. Okay, and there we have it, a finished clown pass, or rainbow pass, or whatever you want to call it, the subsurface scattering of the skin on a monster. Like I said, don't worry how it looks now, it's all going to come together. So I decided to add a bit of these yellows. Now on my recording here, the yellows look a lot more, I guess, much more pigment in the yellow than there actually is. In reality, this is a bit paler and closer to the cream bone color that you zenithalled. So yeah, all the colors here are a little lighter than what they seem in this video. So you don't necessarily have to push it to what you're seeing on the video. It can be a little lighter. But it doesn't matter if you go darker as well, that's all fine. Like I said, sometimes these things just look cool as they are, and you could almost leave it. With a few touch-ups, it would almost be pretty cool just as a monster like this. But yeah, you can see the way all the colors blend together. I'll show you the back. There you go. So where the bone is and so on. And yeah, I think it's a great way to get into this. And pretty much the length of this video, so I suppose around 10 minutes or so, is 10-15 minutes, you'll have it done. You know what I mean? Like it's not a very long process, and then you can really see what your monster is going to end up being like, and this will inform your decision making for your skin layers, and might even inspire you to try something different with the skin. Some of these little blotches and so on that you see on the surface, they're like happy accidents, and that can really get your inspiration and your imagination going for something different than you would normally pick. And because, as I said, if you're doing like an academic bust like this, that can be a really cool thing just to try something new. And you won't use all of these kind of techniques on your regular miniatures for your army painting, but on a single piece like this, it's a great way to flex your painting muscles and get into it. So thanks very much for watching. I hope it helped, and be sure to watch part 2 for where we go through the skin layers and finishing this monster off. So yeah, thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you next time.